Hello, Qrow and Winter here with another Topic of the Week video, and this week it's October, which means it's Halloween month. This month's theme is the web series RWBY, and this week's topic is specifically about two characters that were properly introduced in Volume 3, Yang and Ruby's Uncle Qrow and Weiss's older sister Winter. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr anon, and their topic is: what do you think they intended with Qrow and Winter and RWBY versus what we got? And how would you have handled their characters in a rewrite? I'm glad I got asked this because I do have a significant rewrite for RWBY, but I'll end up talking more about that in the next few videos for this month. Now, there's not really a whole lot to talk about for Winter and Qrow of what the original plans were, because at this point things are shrouded in controversy and just I haven't really been able to find anything super concrete on it. And honestly, the only information that I really found that was of note was this idea that Qrow was supposed to be based off of and voiced by Monty, and then Winter was supposed to be based on and voiced by his wife. So that might explain the weird, awkward, and just kind of uncomfortable attempt at sexual tension between them in Volume 3. That doesn't really work, and the only thing it does is lead to a really dumb and petty fight between them. That was just... But while I can't talk about what the original plans were, I can talk about what they were going for versus how they executed it, and the impressions that we got of both characters in Volumes 1 and 2 before they actually came into the show. Now, we don't really have too much on them, but we have less on Winter, so I'll talk about her first. Now, in terms of the impressions that we got from her character, we didn't really have a whole lot to go off of. The only mention really that she got in Volumes 1 and 2 was in when Weiss was in the tower to assist with the whole RWBY investigation. It's just mentioned that Weiss has a sister named Winter.
Oh, Miss Schnee. Good afternoon. Would you like me to patch you through to your father? I think your sister Winter might be here as well.
No, thank you.
That was really it. We didn't really get information on her. We didn't know what was going on with her. So we had to wait until Volume 3 to actually see her. And I can see exactly what they were going for with her. And I like the idea of it because even without actually, seeing Volume 3, the ideas I had in my head were actually similar to the ones that they had, except they messed it up bad. You see, what they were clearly trying to go for was, Winter being very professional, stoic, and even kind of cold in public. But then, with Weiss in private, she's a little warmer, a little nicer, and helps her. But they messed it up. Like, Winter actually hits Weiss several times, totally unwarranted, and it comes off as kind of abusive. And even when she's in private with her, she's a little bossy and kind of demanding with her. It felt weird, and it also is weird because Weiss clearly adores Winter. She is so excited to see her sister again, and Winter just treats her kind of like crap. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, what? Why? Why have her act like this? And it just seems so weird. And honestly, that hug, I like that they had a hug. It just felt so weird. And when Winter sees that, that Weiss is having this trouble with their dad and, her card getting declined and he's constantly calling her, she basically tells Weiss, you can either go without money or suck it up and, and beg him for money. And I'm sitting there like, why? I mean, we saw earlier that Pyrrha was more than happy to pay for stuff, and considering how freaking rich she is, and I mean, Pyrrha's not the person to be a lavish spender, so she's probably just sitting on millions doing nothing, so I'm sure she would more than happy to pay for stuff for Weiss or Team RWBY, just anything that they would need, because that's just the kind of nice person Pyrrha is. So, I mean, heck, when Weiss's card got declined, she straight up was like, well, Pyrrha came up and she was like, here, let me pay for it. So, that would have actually been nice to see Pyrrha and Weiss have a friendship that, Pyrrha's just totally willing to help her out when she's going through a hard time. It also would have been nice to see Pierre and Weiss have this friendship, especially after Weiss, ironically, treated her the way she didn't want to be treated back in Volume 1 when she was trying to get Pierre on her team. But that's besides the point. That's more about Weiss. But the way Winter talked about that, it was just like, really? Why? Again, there's just a lot of whys. And then after a few episodes, she leaves, and ultimately, Winter doesn't really do much. And she doesn't even come in later when the whole battle of, the battle at Beacon happens. So honestly, I don't really know what was going on with her character there. And honestly, that's it. That's really it. I mean, yeah, I could also talk about her weapon and the fact that how boring it is. It's a sword, which, yes, it looks just like how I wanted it. And then it splits into two swords, and that's it. Really? Like, that's it? I mean, come on, you can crank up the craziness a little bit with her weapons. This is RWBY. This is a series that has gunchucks. Gunchucks! So why have it just be a sword that splits into two? It seems so mundane to me. Now, if I was writing Winter, and the way I have her written in my rewrite, I do go with a similar approach to her character in that she's professional, she's very in control of herself, she's not like super affectionate in public, but in private she's very much caring with Weiss. And ultimately you find out that she has basically been doing everything in her power for years to take care of Weiss and make sure that she didn't get treated with the crap that she could have by their parents. And Winter is very much a protective older sister, and that even though she's like the golden child, she still like just adores her little sister. And I actually did also have the idea of them having a younger brother, and I had this idea before I watched Volume 4. And then I saw Whitley, I'm like, yeah. The version I had was a younger boy who's just ended up being terrified of his parents, so he obeys them, but then Winter is just like, child, let me take care of you. You're my little brother. And, and Winter's just like ultimate protective older sister. But, I actually did draw a little bit of inspiration with Helga and Olga from Hey Arnold. Now, not the rift between the two characters, but really you have, the put upon, younger sister, and then the seemingly perfect older sister who actually does have a hard time with high expectations. And you do find out that Winter did in fact join the military just to get away from her parents. Yeah, she went with career military. She's just like, I want to be around you as little as possible. But ultimately, yeah, there's really not a whole lot to talk about with her character. Oh, except for her weapons. So the weapons seem very similar at first to the ones she has in the show. It's a sword. It splits into two swords. Except those swords also turn into handguns, because you gotta have guns somewhere in this. Though the really fun thing I do with her weapons is her fighting style, which I base entirely off of Gun Kata from Equilibrium, because that sort of really flashy, over-the-top fighting, especially with guns, is perfect for RWBY. On top of that, it actually really fits Winter's character, that very measured, exact, perfect movements, things that Gun Kata is based on, and yeah, it's totally ridiculous, but it's also awesome. And that's why it works in RWBY. And I just love the idea of seeing Winter fight like Christian Bale in that movie, because the action scenes in that movie are just so fun to watch, and I just love to see something like that in RWBY. So really, that's about it when it comes to Winter. I really there's really not a whole lot to talk about with her, at least in terms of rewrite for now. Now, moving on to Qrow. There is a lot with Qrow, specifically coming from the implications and things that are said about his character versus what we ended up getting in the show. Yikes. So the very first thing that we really find out about Qrow is that he's a teacher at Signal.
So, where did you learn to do this?
Signal Academy?
They taught you to use one of the most dangerous weapons ever designed?
Well, one teacher in particular.
I see. It's just that I've only seen one other scythe wielder of that skill before. A dusty old Qrow.
That's my uncle. Sorry. That's my Uncle Qrow. He's a teacher at Signal.
And that doesn't last very long. Yeah, it's so weird because in the first conversation that Ruby and Ozpin have with each other, and he's basically inquiring about how she learned to use a scythe that well. Qrow gets mentioned, and then Ruby says that he's a teacher at Signal. And I'm sitting there like, when I rewatched it, I'm like, wow, I don't ever remember that coming up again. And yeah, it doesn't. At the end of Volume 1, you have this implication that Qrow is in some way working with Ozpin, but we don't really get any exacts, and honestly there's no real explanations until you get to Volume 3, and then you end up with the Maiden plotline. And but one thing I'm baffled about is why they never really explained him being a teacher at Signal, or how he stopped being a teacher at Signal, or if he still is, but he's working part-time. It's not explained, and it seems so odd. And another thing about his character is that I really got the impression that his family, in particular Ruby and Yang, were extremely important to him, because we find out with Yang's back, because he spent all this time training Ruby to use what's a well-known difficult weapon to use, and in Yang's backstory when she talks to Blake in Volume 2, we find out that he had tracked them down after Yang went off to try to find information on Raven. Qrow hunted them down and killed all the Grimm that were about to attack them and saved their lives. So, I really got this idea that he was a deeply caring, I wouldn't say maybe a family man, but he cared about his family, obviously, particularly his nieces. They always called him Uncle Qrow. And it's funny because I wasn't the only person who had this impression, but I always got the impression that he was Summer's brother. And maybe it's because, for the most part, we hear Ruby refer to him as Uncle Qrow. So I had this idea, okay, he's Summer's brother, and, I figured, and they said they were on a team together, so I thought, oh, it's Summer's twin brother.
He wouldn't tell me everything, but I learned that the two of them had been on a team together with Summer and Qrow, and that she'd left me with him just after I was born.
And then I end up, watching Volume 3, and I see his last name is Branwen. I'm like, he's Raven's brother? And that always seemed a little weird to me. I mean, yeah, they have bird names, but, this is RWBY. Like, the naming system in this is just really weird and random, so it's not like that automatically means something. And I don't know, it always felt a little that it would probably be more impactful if he was Summer's brother, because him being a Raven's brother never really did much. And on top of that, the one thing that really bothered me was that his character design echoes more of RWBY than it does of Yang, because he's technically Yang's biological uncle, not RWBY's, yet RWBY and him seem to match the most, especially the fact that he's got a red cape. And he's got, predominantly dark colors, like, especially, dark grays. And when I first looked at his character design, my first thought was related to RWBY. And because, character designs can be used to be very meaningful in the story. So that just seemed to make sense to me. And then I found out that he was Raven's brother and related to Yang, and I just feel like if there was supposed to be some relation like that, that they would have, designed him to look a little bit closer to Yang, to reinforce that familial bond. Yeah, he's close to RWBY, but it just, I don't know, that always just stuck out as weird to me as when I was watching Volume 3. And another thing that really pissed me off when I was watching Volume 3 was the way that Qrow just was a cold douchebag. And he's such a jerk. And I could not stand him in Volume 3. Like, in Volume 4, he has, one good moment, specifically in the Tyrion fight, when Qrow jumps out and says,
"Look, pal, I'm not sure who you are, but you need to leave my niece alone."
And, my reaction was like, finally, he's treating his nieces, like I thought he would. Because when I was watching Volume 3, I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is the Qrow that tracked down Yang and RWBY when they were kids to save their lives. This is the one who spent so much time training RWBY how to fight with a scythe. He came off as cold and very condescending a lot. You know, he never treated anyone with real respect. He was a douche to Winter, like so unnecessarily douchey.
Hey. Yeah. I'm talking to you, Ice Queen.
Halt! Excuse me? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?
Shh. Not you.
Hey!
You. So that gaudy ship of yours in town? I guess you're here too.
I'm standing right before you.
So it would seem.
You realize you just destroyed Atlas military property.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I mistook this for some sort of sentient garbage.
I don't have time for your immature games, Qrow.
He even seemed cold with RWBY and Yang. And the scene where RWBY and Yang are basically like, hey, you know, look at what we've done, and then Qrow is just like, you think you've done good? There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I get that. We're pretty much pros, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, read the news sometime. We totally saved Vale while you were gone.
Funny, because I heard Vale suffered a grim attack after you almost managed to stop a train. But they don't give out medals for almost.
They do, and they're called silver.
Well, we helped take down Roman Torchwick. He's locked up in Ironwood ship, and crime's been down ever since. That's basically a bounty mission.
Sure, you may be acting like huntresses, but you're not thinking like one. You really think 4 girls and their friends could end all crime in the kingdom?
I mean, I did until you said that.
And he felt just kind of condescending and rude. But even worse is later on, after Yang is, you know, tricked into attacking Mercury and framed for cheating. You know, everyone is basically treating her like a criminal, and the only people who offer her, you know, completely unambiguous support is RWBY and Weiss. Even Blake doubts her at first, and Iron was just like, well, you know, sucks. And then when Qrow shows up, I was thinking, alright, Qrow's gonna, like, I mean, Yang is having, like, an emotional breakdown. It's like, it's just, ew, that was hard to watch. And then Qrow comes in, and I'm thinking, alright, you know, Uncle Qrow's gonna come in here and be like, hey, you know, something's fishy here. But no, he comes in, he's like, well, you either did it on purpose or you're crazy. And I'm like, oh, and I was watching this, and I was like,
Hey there, Firecracker.
Hey, Qrow.
So, why'd you do it?
You know why.
All I know is that you attacked a helpless kid. So either you're lying, or you're crazy.
I'm not lying.
Crazy. Got it.
Who knows? Maybe I am.
And here I thought your dark-haired friend was the emo one.
and I'm just... What? I mean, Qrow is supposed to be this, you know, experienced huntsman. And you, like, I'm sorry, but she's saying that she saw someone attacking her and no one was really attacking her. I'm like, you should know. You should know that, you know, Yang would never lie about this stuff like this.
How can you say something like that? Yang would never lie to us.
She would certainly never lie. She's sure, she can be hot-headed and quick to fight, but
You're hot-headed, but not ruthless.
she'd never go out of her way to attack someone who is defenseless, especially not in an official tournament. She would never do something like this. I mean, a lot of that part of the show is so weird because Ozpin wasn't there, Glinda wasn't there, Oobleck wasn't there, Port wasn't there, and no one decided to jump in and investigate this despite it being super suspicious, and Emerald having a known ability to, trick people and alter their perceptions, but I just that whole plotline was a mess. But Qrow doesn't really offer her any true support. I'm like, Qrow, if you're so experienced, you should, one, you should know that this is extremely out of character for Yang, and two, you should know that there should be some people out there who have the ability to alter perceptions like Emerald could, who have the ability to trick your senses or mind control you or something. Like, this is so fishy, but no one gives her the benefit of the doubt. And, even Qrow seems super skeptical of her saying that she was tricked, and just, it's like, this is not the Qrow that I had imagined based off of what RWBY and Yang had said, and even going back and rewatching Volume 1. Yeah, I'm definitely, sure that this is not the kind of person that he was implied to be before. And I mean, sure, yeah, he may not be perfect. I mean, there's a difference between not being perfect and not offering even the basic human decency to your family. And family he supposedly cares about enough to track them down as children and protect them from Grem. And, now, another thing that came in this season is his alcoholism. And he's definitely an alcoholic. When we first see him at that bar, slosh drunk, and he doesn't even really care about what's going on in the match, which that is also something that seemed weird to me. Like, if he doesn't really care about what's going on in the Vital, festival tournament, even though his two nieces are in it, that just seemed off. But being an alcoholic, it's not exactly something that I'm against, even though there was no hint of that before. I can kind of get where this could actually be an interesting subversion. This idea that, Qrow is built up as some sort of heroic figure, but when you meet him, he's not as heroic. That's fine, if handled correctly. But one of the things that really trashes this is it's the fact that his alcoholism is played as a joke.
He was drunk. He's always drunk.
And I felt really uncomfortable with those scenes and those jokes. Like, I have never personally been affected by alcoholism, not directly. And I know people who have, and I've talked to them, and they were, super uncomfortable with that. And, I mean, geez, if I've never been affected by it, and I thought those jokes were, tasteless and unfunny and just uncomfortable, I can only imagine how someone who actually has been affected by alcoholism would feel. I mean, alcoholism is a serious thing, and a character being drunk, being funny is one thing, but the way they portray him is basically being an alcoholic. It's just, cut out the jokes on those, because that just doesn't work. And for how dark and serious the show gets, and for how people keep saying that it's delving into serious issues, you would think that alcoholism would be serious? If you want to be serious, treat it as a serious problem. I mean, that's what I do on my rewrite. I mean, treat Qrow's alcoholism as something that deeply affects him and deeply hurts him, and is something that really is a strain on his family. Say that the reason that he doesn't work at Signal anymore is because he got fired because of his alcoholism. And then he started working for Ozpin. I guess when Volume 3 comes around, that doesn't really work because it implies that he's been an agent for a really long time. But just that's a whole other can of worms. And I can really see what they were going for with his character. What they were going for was very much like a Han Solo type character, a dashing rogue who he's snarky and makes witty comments, and everyone loves him because he's so cool, but he's just a complete jerk. And one of the standout jerk moments from Volume 3 is when he's in the office with Pyrrha and Ozpin is telling Pyrrha about the maidens, and then Qrow just pisses all over Team Juniper, and tells Pyrrha that, you carry Team Juniper, even though she's like, we're a team, we work as a team, and he's like, no, you carry them. And then Pyrrha was basically like, You want to go? You want to insult my team? You want to insult Jean, Ren, and Nora? Like, no. We're going to throw down, and honestly, I really wanted to see her throw down.
It comes as no surprise that they've chosen you to move on to the final round of the tournament. Your performance has been exemplary.
Thank you, Professor Ozpin, but I would never have made it this far without my teammates.
Personally, I think it's the other way around.
I'm sorry, but I don't believe we've been introduced.
Name's Qrow.
But I mean, that comes down to the whole show, Volume 3 very much trying to, like, sort of sweep all of her character under the rug, all the vulnerabilities and the insecurities and, you know, the loneliness that she has in her life, you know, and just trying to build this up as she's invincible, which is, up until that point, really only mentioned by Cinder. And it just didn't really work, and it was just so douchey of Qrow. You know, especially, it doesn't even make sense, because in the first round of the Vital Festival tournament for Team Juniper, Nora's the one who one-hit KOs the entire enemy team. Literally, Jean's just like, Nora, take care of him, and she's just like, Boosh! I'm like, why is it Nora being brought up as the big heavy hitter of the team? Why is everyone treating Pyrrha? It's like, shoot, Nora's probably one of the most devastating characters in the entire show, especially, you know, out of Beacon, and especially out of the, you know, Team RWBY and Juniper. She's probably one of the biggest heavy hitters with her freaking grenade launcher hammer. So it just seems so weird to have Pyrrha placed in that, and then have, you know, Qrow spout these lines when he obviously doesn't know anything about them, which is just ultimately just super douchey. Now, the way I would handle him in the rewrite is that I would drop the super douchey stuff. I would definitely include the alcoholism, but I would most certainly treat this as a serious problem. Do you know how much angst you can squeeze out of that? You know, you want to talk about, you know, darkness in the show, why not show the alcoholism and how it affects his life? Can you imagine having to see RWBY and Yang take care of Qrow when he's just blackout drunk? Can you imagine them maybe coming home and they see Qrow with alcohol and they're trying to get the alcohol away from him, and then and then RWBY's trying to grab a bottle of beer from him, and ultimately she's like, Uncle Qrow, please give me just let go, and he sees Summer, and then he just breaks down. Do you know how much angst you could squeeze out of this? If you want to use this as a plot line, you know, if you want to use this as a part of his character, you can make this as part of the story. You want to be dark? You want to be dark? Why don't you show the effects of alcoholism destroying his life? Show the fact that he got fired from Signal because of it. Show the fact that he struggles because he's so dependent on alcohol, but he knows how much this hurts. You know, RWBY, Yang, and Taeyang, you know, these are his family, and, you know, he loves them and cares about them, but he's got these issues that he just can't control. You know, show him trying to get sober for them, trying for RWBY and Yang, trying in memory of Summer, just trying and, you know, struggling with it. You know, that, you know, and for all the deaths in the show, that, you know, all the stupid grimdark stuff that happens, all that stuff never really worked in the show. But if you focused on Qrow's alcoholism as a serious problem, you could really, that would be far more emotional impactful than any death. Because you'd really get to see just how much this affects, and especially affect RWBY and Yang, two of our main characters. You know, you could see how this affects them, and it would just be heartbreaking. And you can see Qrow trying to make these efforts to improve himself, to be better for his nieces, which would be very, very heartwarming. And you got so much stuff you can do with that. Like, you know, that just seems like if you want to have something that's heart-wrenching, that just seems like the obvious way to go. And maybe even at some point in the show he gets sober. So all that struggles that he went through, he ends up paying off and showing that, you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Another thing with his character is, oh my gosh, this is something I didn't point out, but I really have to say this. I hate the fact that he barely uses his scythe. being described as a scythe wielder in episode 1, shown that in the volume 2 flashbacks for Yang, when he attacked the Graham, he did have a scythe that looked pretty darn similar to Crescent Rose. So I would expect him to be using a scythe more, but... And while I do like the way his scythe works, the whole clockwork stuff, like, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. It just... He only... In between volumes 1 and 4, he only uses it once. And even then, it's barely anything at the Battle of Beacon. We don't really get much focus on him using it. In fact, the main bit of him doing it is that one thing where it looks like he's about to attack Ironwood, which he's not going to attack Ironwood. He's going to attack a Grem behind him. And that's it. And you see a couple times when he's going to pull out his, he's using this big sword, which is just generic, and he's activating, the transformation sequence, and ultimately he ends up having to, cancel it, every time he does it. And it's such a tease with it, and it especially seems really, really weird in Volume 4 when you see in the opening it shows Qrow with his scythe, but he never uses it in the season. He only, gets ready to use it once against the fight in Tyrion, but then he doesn't have time to. And what seems weird is that it takes an awful long time for the sword to transform into a scythe, and to be honest, I don't even like the design of the scythe. I like the more Crescent Rose looking one that he was shown to have in, the Volume 2 flashback. But, it seems weird that it would take so long when we see the transformation sequences for every other weapon are very fast. Even something like Pyrrha's, which has three forms, her main weapon has 3 forms, the sword, the spear, and the rifle. It's like, whoosh, done. So why is Qrow's, he clicks it, it's like, it just takes forever. Like, why? Well, and it seems like they don't even want to animate him, fighting with the scythe, but then why even have him there? Why have Qrow fight if he's not even going to use his scythe? Because what I want to see? I want to see a skilled scythe wielder. the guy who taught RWBY, who's super competent with it. I want to see this guy whip butt with his scythe. I want to see him and RWBY fight side by side. Tag teaming. And that would be freaking awesome. Mentor and student, uncle and niece. The master and the apprentice. And that's just so exciting to see. And that seems like an obvious setup for a fight. Like if you're coming up ideas for a fight in a volume, that just seems obvious. And it seems obvious to have Qrow use a scythe. And okay, if it has a sword as a secondary function, all right, that's fine. It actually makes me think of Gehrman's scythe in Bloodborne, where one hand it's got the sword, and then you can put it together and it pops out into a scythe. So that would have been cool, but ultimately, like, if me writing it, he uses a scythe as his main weapon all the time. That's his thing. This is the guy who taught RWBY how to fight with a scythe, so I want to see some scythe fighting action. And like I mentioned before, I would definitely make him RWBY's biological uncle and Summer's twin brother, because that just seems so logical to me. I meang, just imagine this. Qrow becomes an alcoholic because of the loss of his twin sister, and after Raven did all that crap and left Taiyang with a baby Yang, and I would imagine that Summer and Qrow would come in and help him out with that, and then Summer and Taiyang get married and they have a child, and then not too long after that, Summer's disappears, and I can only imagine how hard that would be for Qrow. And really, that's oh my gosh, I can just imagine how much emotion you can wring out of that. Imagine falling into that depression and alcoholism. And ultimately, this gives Qrow a much stronger connection to the story and to RWBY by having her be her biological uncle and being the brother of Summer, which definitely ties him directly into the whole thing with Summer, which is, just a mess that affected that family bad. And it really ties him into that, and you could show guilt over not being able to protect his sister, how much he misses her. Oh my gosh, like, again, like I said, if you want to be serious and dark, you could really delve into that. And you could really definitely have him and RWBY truly share the loss of Summer. Them being, related to her. You could really, really drive that home. And I would definitely focus on, especially with the way I write a lot of the stuff, because I do take everything that was said in volumes 1 and 2, just the show, not the World of Remnant songs, etc. One thing I would do with his character, I would delve into him being a teacher at Signal, even if it wasn't for that long of time, because I would have him be a teacher. He became a teacher when Yang started attending Signal, and then he taught up until RWBY was, right when she was brought into Beacon, and he ended up getting fired because of his alcoholism, but ultimately decided, hey, I did my thing. I, taught my nieces how to fight, and then, then you could even segue that into him working with Ozpin. And you can have him, working, and personally, the way I write it, he did start working for, he would just start working for Ozpin after that, especially, after Taiyang, asks Ozpin, hey, is there anything you can do for my brother-in-law, because, he's a mess right now. Yeah, and, then I'd have him stick around in the story for a bit, show up in Volume 3, much like he does, except in my Volume 3, the Vital Festival does get cancelled, because that just seems like the most logical course of events. And, then he shows up for that, and he shows up for a bit of the plot. And ultimately, I do have this one part of the rewrite. After, Team RWBY graduates, they do end up mentoring under Qrow. And so you actually get to see more of him. In fact, he basically ends up sticking around with them for the most part after that point. So, yeah, you get a lot of Qrow, and especially a lot of interactions with RWBY and Yang, and, Team RWBY overall. And I think as the stuff that's just about his character, that's about all that I can really talk about, especially without delving into a bunch of individual plot lines. Though, considering that I wrote up to Volume 12, that's a lot, and I'd be here talking for hours if I was going on all that. So yeah, I think that's about it that I can talk about for Winter and Qrow. So, yeah. I think I'm just gonna end this one right here. So if you want to submit a topic, comment below on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic colon and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.